She was walking to church. That was the whole of it. A short walk on a summer morning, a route she had taken before, a destination her parents knew, a child who was expected to arrive. The Trinity Chapel Christian Reformed Church in Broomall was close enough to her house that nobody thought twice about her going on foot. She was 8 years old. It was August. Bible camp was almost over. This was the last session of the summer. She never walked through the door. Gretchen Harrington was born in 1967 in Broomall, Pennsylvania, a quiet, close-knit suburban community in Delaware County, just west of Philadelphia, the kind of neighborhood where families went to church together, where children played outside until dinner, where the pastor was a trusted figure in nearly every household. Gretchen was 8 years old, small, full of life in the specific way her family would spend decades trying to put into words. Her family's statement, released nearly 50 years after her death, said it the clearest: if you met Gretchen, you were instantly her friend. She exuded kindness to everyone around her. She was sweet and gentle. At 8 years old, she had already made a lifelong impact on the people who knew her. That was who she was before August 15, 1975. That morning she set out on foot for Trinity Chapel, the same church her family attended, the same church where summer Bible camp had been running all week. The pastor of that church was a man named David Zanstra, a family friend, someone the Harringtons trusted, someone whose face Gretchen knew as well as she knew any adult in her life. He was 24 years old. He had been serving as pastor at Trinity Chapel in Marple Township for a relatively short time, long enough to be woven into the fabric of the congregation, long enough to be a recognizable presence to every child in the community. Gretchen never arrived at the church. A search began immediately. Neighbors, volunteers, police moving through Broomall and the surrounding area, knocking on doors, calling her name. Zanstra joined the search. He walked alongside neighbors, alongside other church members, alongside Gretchen's family, searching for a child he already knew he would not find where they were looking. 2 months passed. On a trail inside Ridley Creek State Park in Media, Pennsylvania, 2 months after she vanished, a jogger found her remains. Her clothing was nearby. The autopsy determined she had died from blunt force trauma to the head. She had been beaten to death. She was 8 years old. David Zanstra presided over her funeral. He stood at the pulpit of the church where Gretchen had been walking when he took her, in front of her family, in front of her community, in front of everyone who loved her, and he led the service. He expressed grief. He offered comfort. He performed the full architecture of pastoral care for a family whose daughter he had killed, and then he moved on. He continued his ministry, eventually relocating to Georgia, then Texas, building decades of pastoral life on top of what he had done on a summer morning in 1975. He was never arrested. He was never questioned seriously. The case went cold and stayed that way for 48 years. Then, in 2022, a woman contacted Pennsylvania State Police with something she had been carrying for a long time. She was a lifelong friend of Zanstra's daughter, had known the family since childhood, had spent time in their home, had been at a sleepover at their house in 1975. Days before Gretchen Harrington disappeared, she told investigators, Zanstra had groped her at that sleepover. She was a child. She had never forgotten it. The report landed with investigators who had never stopped thinking about Gretchen, and it opened a door. State police detectives scheduled an interview with Zanstra, now 83 years old and retired in Marietta, Georgia. They flew south, sat across from him, and began asking questions about August 15, 1975. What happened in that room over the course of that interview would become the most contested element of everything that followed. According to investigators, Zanstra confessed. He described seeing Gretchen walking alone toward the church, offering her a ride, driving her into a wooded area, instructing her to remove her clothing. When she refused, when an 8-year-old girl said no, he punched her in the head. He said he saw her bleeding and believed she was dead. He covered her body with brush and left. He told detectives it was something he had replayed in his mind many times over the intervening decades. On July 24, 2023, Delaware County District Attorney Jack Stolzheimer announced the arrest of David Zanstra, 83 years old, retired pastor, grandfather, charged with first-degree murder, second-degree murder, third-degree murder, kidnapping, and possession of an instrument of crime. The community that had lost Gretchen nearly 50 years earlier absorbed the news with the specific, complicated grief of people who had waited a very long time for a name. Stolsteimer stood at the podium and described what Zandstra had done. Killing a child who trusted him, then searching for her body with her family, then conducting her funeral, as something almost beyond language. He killed this poor 8-year-old girl, Stolsteimer said, and then acted as a family friend for years afterward. Zandstra spent 18 months in custody. He maintained his innocence throughout. His defense attorney, Mark Much, built the trial around a single argument, that the confession had been coerced, that detectives had pressured and tricked an 83-year-old man into admitting to something he had not done. Much pointed out to the jury that without the confession, there was no physical evidence connecting Zandstra to Gretchen's death. No DNA, no forensic trace, nothing that could survive 50 years of degradation and still point to him. He presented the jury with alternate suspects: Richard Bailey, a convicted child rapist and kidnapper who was seen a mile from Gretchen's route the day she disappeared, and who died in state prison in the 1990s. He also surfaced something far more unsettling. Gretchen's own sister, Zoe Harrington, had told police in 2021 that she had killed Gretchen herself, with a rock, during what she described as a bizarre occult ritual involving her father. Prosecutors dismissed Zoe's confession entirely, noting her documented history of serious mental illness. Gretchen's father, Harold Harrington, who had also been a pastor, died in 2021 before investigators could fully explore the claim. Much's closing argument landed on one sentence: if David Zandstra doesn't talk to police, nobody is here today. They had no evidence to arrest him in 2023. The confession was everything. If the jury believed it was coerced, the case collapsed. The jury deliberated for approximately 1 hour. On January 17, 2025, they returned a verdict of not guilty on all charges. Zandstra, 84 years old by then, hugged his attorney as the verdict was read. His co-counsel released a statement saying the family was relieved to bring him home, while also expressing that their hearts, along with all of Delaware County, still broke for the Harrington family. The Harrington family had no perpetrator, no answer that had survived a courtroom. Gretchen's case is technically unsolved. No active charges, no named killer the justice system has confirmed, no resolution that gave her family what 50 years of waiting had made them believe they were finally going to receive. Investigators have not announced plans to reopen the case. They have asked anyone with information about Gretchen's death to contact Pennsylvania State Police. She was 8 years old. She was walking to church. Whoever took her from that sidewalk on August 15, 1975, has never been held accountable in any courtroom that mattered. The case, after 50 years, an arrest, a confession, a trial, and an acquittal remains, in every practical sense, open.